Hey, thank you for joining me here in my little corner of the world, all the way over to you. It is great to see you again. If you are viewing here on YouTube, which I hope you are when you get the chance, but also I'm available on all those platforms, as they call them, such as Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Deezer, so many. We just get syndicated all over the place, don't we? Just so we could hear all these wonderful interviews with really talented individuals. Today is absolutely no different. I have an author on here today, another author. I love having authors on here. And the discipline that authors have and what they go through is just astounding. So I'm always fascinated, not by just musicians, but these authors are just completely amazing the way that they can get the information, synthesize it, and put out these great books. Today it's Mark Brend. He wrote a book about somebody who really could have been a contender, David Ackles. Nobody knows who he is. Nobody knows who David Ackles is. David Ackles was really big in the late 60s and the early 1970s, and so many of the big stars that we have today that were even big back then, such as Sir Elton John, really love this guy. In fact, I think David Ackles had opened up for him in LA at the Troubadour, played that venue. So Mark put together this great book about a guy who really could have been. It's a big mystery as to where he went after a couple of albums. And we go through that and what he did in the Los Angeles area for so long. Mark is also British. So it was nice to speak with somebody who is across the pond. I haven't been across the pond in a while, actually. Closest I came over there was visiting London back in the mid 1990s and was just fascinated with that city. It was a bit nippy. Went there around Boxing Day. But anyway, this is a great conversation I have with Mark. We go over David Ackles is just, yeah, a real genius, real good composer. I would probably maybe say someone, he's not like Leonard Cohen, nothing like that. I mean, he's somebody who just like wasn't huge, but like was very deep and just had just an incredible amount of work out there. We talk about some of these amazing tracks like The Road to Cairo, a very bluesy number on his debut album. His sophomore album is really, really good. Great track on there called Candyman. Good stuff. And it's available wherever you get music. It was kind of a mystery for a long time as to what happened with David. Things just kind of fell through. He was in contact with somebody like Clive Davis, but the record company at that time just like it fizzled out. Clive ended up leaving at that point, as we talk about in this. So great to see you all. Great to see you here in mid-August of 2025. It's a brutal summer here in the greater metro Atlanta area, as it always is. I don't expect anything less. We do get some summers where we could get a little bit of a respite in the name of rain. That's the only thing that really brings it down. But this is one of these summers where it's not raining enough. When we get it, some people just get very violent thunderstorms in their area, and others just don't see anything. In my area, where I'm at, well north of Atlanta, it is been really missing a lot of rain. Not that I need the lightning. Who needs that? That's scary enough as it is. I've seen it strike, and it's not fun. Trust me. But as I think about it, it's like it's been years since we had like a really rainy summer, and it really kept the temperatures down. So, well, enough about that. It's just, hey, it's hot Atlanta. You expect it, but it's tough to get through. It's kind of like our version of winter, but here's the great thing. You don't have to drive in anything like snow like they have up in the north in the winter time. You have that physical barrier, that challenge that you have to deal with. And our worst weather is the extreme heat. So, I mean, the worst thing is, yeah, you got to crank the AC, which, the poor little AC units. I probably said that a zillion times here before, but I always feel sorry for them. It's terrifying. It really is. Then you can get like overcooled at times. Like if you're sitting under an air conditioner, like I am right now, then you go outside and it's like muggy and hot, and it's like that's a great way to get sick, isn't it? And there are plenty of people who probably do get sick in the summertime because of those huge temperature swings. You could just overcool yourself way too much. Then you go out there and you're like, oh my gosh, it's like totally different. Kind of cut back on the running a little bit too. I can't get up that early these days because I've been working kind of later days here now. So it's been a little tough. I mean, if I get out, I'll hit the old treadmill to get that old exercise in there. But other than that, we're making it through here. This is mid-August. Mark's book is just coming out. And get it wherever you get those books. Mark Brend, Brend, I believe. And you can get that anywhere, your Amazons or Barnes and Nobles. Interesting book, really, really interesting book about a real major talent and somebody who had gone on to doing some interesting things once he was done with the music business. It's a tough business. Media is tough, and these days there are other challenges with media. It's really, really, really tough to deal with and tough to compete in this environment. So we go over that a lot too. So anyway, enjoy my talk with author Mark Brend, who's way over there in the UK. Hope you enjoy.
Hi, Bob.
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
Good. Good. Hanging in there. Where
Good.
where are you speaking from this morning?
I'm from Exeter in Devon, southwest of England.
Excellent. And weather is doing fine this time of year?
It's warm for us, actually. Yeah, it's about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, so
Fahrenheit.
it's quite good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a great pleasure. An author of many books here, and this latest one is quite interesting. And what are its origins? Your interest in it? It seems to go back at least 40 years. Your interest in this artist, Mr. Ackles.
Yes, David Ackles. Yes, I first came across him, as you say, 40 years ago. I found one of his albums for sale secondhand. Didn't know who he was. I just bought it because I liked the cover and was fascinated by his music. I discovered that he made four albums, which I acquired, and I've always loved his work. And over the years, it dawned on me quite quickly that he was somebody who wasn't widely known, and yet the people who do know about him tend to really love him passionately. And I thought there was an interesting story there about why he made records that were so admired by some people, and yet he remains largely unknown.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Just stumbling on an artist like that, I guess you would almost say a no-hit wonder. Somebody, and you didn't hear this on the radio, especially in those days. So yeah, I mean, but he inspired many in the music community, some names that we know, like Sir Elton John.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I mean, he was actually more popular in the UK than he was. He's an American, but he was less popular in America. But he came to the UK in 1968 to promote his first album, and quite a lot of songs from that first album were covered by reasonably well-known British artists like the Hollies and Spooky Tooth and Martin Carthy, and Elton John and Bernie Taupin, who were just starting out then, were huge fans of David Ackles and remain so to this day.
Yeah, yeah, and it's fascinating writing that just when you dig deep into his catalog, which I believe starts in 1968, and he recorded four albums.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, very interesting debut solo album that just really has, and I love that opening track, the Road to Cairo. Just has a real deep bluesy sense. Do you notice over this four album catalog the arc, the changes that he had gone through, and did you do a deep dive into his muse and what had inspired him through the recording career?
Yes, very much so. I mean, he was unusual in those times, in that his recording career didn't start until he was in his 30s. And in those days, that was really old, you know.
Mhm.
And he had spent a lot of his adult life up until that point. He was mainly interested in musical theatre, and he did various things related to musical theatre, and that was his real inspiration. And what you see in his career, that he started out um, with material that just about fitted into what you could hear happening elsewhere. It sounded just about like on the fringes of rock music and the singer-songwriter movement. But by the time you get to his third album, which is American Gothic, he let his musical theatre influences come to the fore, and it really doesn't sound like. I mean, it's released on Elektra, which was a great hip rock label and folk label, but it doesn't sound like anything else that Elektra or anyone else released at the time, and yet that was very. And it was an interesting thing, because that album got a hugely positive press response. You know, the reviews were saying this is that there are, it's quite funny to read them now, but there are a lot of reviews at the time that were discussing whether that album or Sergeant Pepper were the best albums ever made, and
Amazing.
and the reviews were that good, and yet the album didn't sell particularly well, and he only did one more after that, and then it was over. He was gone.
That's just absolutely incredible when it's, at least in the critics really, seem to take to it. Now, I'm sure not every single critic was in love with it, but definitely different. What is the theory, though? Do you have a theory as to why does an American artist do well in the UK, but doesn't really scratch the surface back at home? I mean, there are a couple of examples you could see. The band Sparks comes to mind, very much. I mean, did very well overseas, but like from California, and basically they have a very eclectic, small following here on our soil in America.
Yeah. Well, Scott Walker's another example of an American
Yeah.
artist who I understand really didn't register much in the US at all, but was a big star here for a while. Uh, who knows? Who knows why? I mean, David Ackles was interesting in that actually his mother was English. So by parentage, he was half English. He grew up in the States and spent almost all his life there. So he was an American, but he had a strong English sensibility and was very connected through the mother's side of his family to the English music hall. His grandparents and other relatives were involved on the stage professionally, and that very much came through in his music later on. And also, he seemed to get the English folk community seemed to pick up on him quite a bit. He had a song called "His Name Is Andrew," which is a very, you know, extreme, involved narrative ballad. And it's been covered quite a few times within the English traditional folk community, which is strange, really. That's a man from Los Angeles writing a song about somebody who loses his faith, and it becomes a popular song in the English traditional folk community. I don't know why that happens. Who can say?
Yeah, yeah. So putting the book together, how long did this take from idea to finish?
Oh, I don't. I mean, it probably took about 2 years, but I've been
Yeah.
thinking about it for a long time before then. And I had actually written about David Ackles a bit before. I'd written a few articles and a chapter in another book. So I'd, I've been researching him for about 25 years, really, on and off, but the last 2 years more intensely.
Yeah, and it has a very interesting early life, especially studying abroad and studied literature abroad. So that probably brings a lot of the sensibilities into the lyric writing as well.
Yes, I think so. He spent a year in Edinburgh in Scotland, studying uh, Old English, and he was quite cultured in that respect. He would never really formally studied music, but he could play the piano very well, and became, in a technical sense, musically very competent. But he also, as well as before that, he had a interesting phase in his life because he was a child actor in a series of films, Rusty films, with Rusty being a dog, and there were half a dozen of those films, a few more, I think. And he was in. He had supporting parts in quite a few of those films when he was between the age of about 8 and 12, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. He was kind of wanting to be more like a top and kind of a character in the music business, but he was influenced by somebody named Jack Holzman who wanted to say, "Hey, you got the goods. You're it. Get up there and start recording." I'm sure that had to feel probably kind of strange to him. And he also, like you were saying earlier, a little bit older than the singer-songwriter that's was coming out in the late 1960s.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, Jack Holzman is a fascinating man himself, of course, and he started Elektra Records right back in the 50s. And when Ackles was signed, he was signed in late 67, and the idea was that he would be a songwriter for other artists. He made some demos, and Jack Holzman said, I think you should record these yourself. I think you should be the recording artist. And so David Ackles found himself in a recording studio making an album out of nowhere, really. He had no expectation that that would happen. He hadn't played live as a performer. He had none of the background that people normally have before they get to that stage of making their first album.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a trippy and theatrical feel in this track called Blue Ribbons that kind of piqued my interest as I'm listening to this debut solo album. And
Mm.
it really just tells you how much that was inspirational to him going back then. Which of the tracks were covered by other artists like Spooky Tooth, Martin, Carthy? Uh,
Well, on the first album, The Road to Cairo was almost a hit for Julie Driscoll and the Brian Auger Trinity because they'd had a big hit with This Wheel's on Fire, the Bob Dylan song, and Road to Cairo was their follow-up single, and everyone was expecting that it would be a hit, but it wasn't really. I'm not sure why. So that was covered. Downriver was covered by the Hollies and Spooky Tooth and a couple of other less well-known artists. Be My Friends is another song from that album, was covered by several English folk singers. And then His Name is Andrew was the one that was covered by Martin Carthy.
yeah, heavy on the organ in there too. So was David very much a multi-instrumentalist, or is he basically just at the piano?
He's just playing piano. The organ on that album is a guy called Michael Fonfara, who went on to play with all manner of artists. I think he was in Lou Reed's band in the 70s or 80s, for example.
Hmm. Yeah, he was a really good working musician. Back then, you really paid your dues. It wasn't like just getting on a talent show and all of a sudden your debut album has 5 hit singles or something like that. It's just you had to really pay your dues back in those days, late 1960s, early 1970s, and all those guys very much. So, I mean, he sounded like he did all those kind of things, but as we always know, the music business is so tricky. It's so hard to say, hey, what's a hit? What's a hit album? What's a hit single? It's very tough. That's what the A&R guys are for.
Mm, yes, yeah, that's right. I mean, he was somebody who didn't quite find his niche really. He got a lot of good press, and but even when he was playing live as a live performer, he could sing and play very well. So technically, he was really good. And I've heard about 3 or 4 hours of recordings of him live, and the standard of musical performance is very high. But there wasn't really a right venue for him because he was a solo piano playing singer songwriter. He didn't play with the band apart from once in the UK. And he tended to end up in folk clubs, which wasn't quite right, or supporting rock bands, which didn't work either. So although he played live quite a lot for a few years, he was never comfortable with it, and it it didn't really. He couldn't ever break himself through playing live.
And speaking of live, he was at the Troubadour in 1970. Was that opening up for Elton John?
Yes, he played there the year before, the 69 opening for Joni Mitchell.
Mm.
And then I think in 71 or 72, he headlined there. But he supported Elton John in August 1970 at those famous breakthrough gigs when Elton came over to the US for the first time and that played the gigs that of now immortalized in the film Rocket Man. David was the support act, and Bernie Taupin and Elton John were both amazed and also I think a bit embarrassed that he was their support act because they idolized him. They
Hmm.
thought he was great, and he was 2 albums into his career by then, and they were just starting out, and they thought it was really strange and uncomfortable that David was supporting them. But by all accounts, they got on very well, and David and Bernie Taupin in particular became good friends after that gig.
And they became friends all the way until David passed. Has it been throughout all those years?
I believe so. Yeah, I think they were particularly close for a few years afterwards, because then, of course, Bernie Taupin produced David's third album, American Gothic, which is the one that got the "Is this as good as Sergeant Pepper" type of comments. But yes, and they remained friends after that.
And he actually moved to England, Wargrave, which is where is that exactly in England?
Wargrave is in Berkshire. It's kind of, let me see, about 40 miles west of London. So it's a prime commuter territory, really. It's a very pretty village on the River Thames, and another river. There's another river that joins the Thames there called the Loddon. And David lived there for about just under a year, I think. He went there to record American Gothic. So he lived in this little wooden house that was on like brick stilts right by the river, and he prepared the album there in that house. And when he came to record it, it was recorded in London, and he'd catch the train down every day, uh, do the 8 hour session or however long it was, then come back on the train to the house in Wargrave. And on the cover of the album, American Gothic, you that's the house you see there. There are pictures of David and Janice, who he later married, are on the cover of the album. The house was so near the river it would quite often flood,
Oh
and
gosh.
to get to that from the house to the road where his car was, he'd have to get in a little rowing boat and row across the floodwater to get to dry land where his car was.
Wow, what an experience. And he
Yes.
loved being by the water, obviously, downriver, and all this inspirational stuff.
Yeah, so the river was a sort of recurring motive in his songs. There were quite a lot of songs that mention the river. Um, and he said later that he really loved living in England and would have quite happily stayed there, but career-wise, it wasn't possible. He needed to be back in Los Angeles.
Yeah, Bernie Taupin. So he went on to do it. Did Bernie Taupin produce other acts after David?
I don't know about that. I'm not sure. I really don't know. I mean, he's obviously known as being Elton John's lyricist, but he was in Elektra's orbit at the time
Yeah.
because he had done a solo album, a spoken word album that came out before American Gothic, and so he knew Jack Holtzman, and he was already friends with David, and somehow all of those connections led to the idea that Bernie would produce American Gothic.
Yeah, American Gothic has a really great texture to it. You got pianos, woodwinds, all kinds of textures to it. You could hear that difference. Definitely for sure. Recorded in London at is that a pretty legendary studio? There's IBC Studio.
Yeah, IBC Studios was a big studio from the 50s onwards, really. It's not a recording studio now. The Who had recorded there, Hendrix had recorded there, uh, the Kinks, I think, pretty certain the Rolling Stones. Most of the big British acts had recorded there. It's right in central London near Oxford Circus, in a big old uh, townhouse, and the main studio room was a room where they'd like knocked the floor out, so it had a 40-foot high ceiling, and it, it and the control booth was in a sort of elevated platform mezzanine type thing in the corner of the room, and that's where David recorded the album. The Damon Lyons Shaw, who was the engineer who'd engineered Tommy by the Who at that studio, he said that they largely recorded live. So David would sit down in this big room with the orchestra, and they play and sing live together.
Yeah, I could definitely feel that. It's just got a lot of laudatory, comments. And when they were promoting this album, he was on the old gray whistle test. How did that come to be? And now they never archived that performance, as you were saying in the book.
Sadly not. No, he was on BBC TV three times actually. He was initially on a 1968 program called Color Me Pop, and then the successor to that program was called Disco 2, I think, and he was on that as well. And then the successor to that was the Old Grey Whistle Test, which was a long-running rock show on the BBC, and it was very much for was much more albums orientated. It wasn't really a kind of hit singles program. And but the people who were behind the Old Grey Whistle Test and produced it had already booked him twice before for these earlier shows. So he was known to them. And it's thought that he did two songs on the Old Grey Whistle Test in
Hmm.
early 72, just piano and vocals. But as you say, the footage was wiped. There's no um, record of it at all, sadly.
Hmm.
His very first UK TV appearance, Colour Me Pop, the audio survives of that. So we can hear him, but we can't see him, which is
Yeah.
frustrating. And that was the one time he played live with the band. He played with the pickup band when he came over, toured Europe, came into London, and he was put with the pickup band who he didn't know, and they rehearsed for half an hour, then straight into playing live.
Yeah, it's a shame. Back then, obviously, videotape was pretty expensive, so a lot
Mm.
of networks, recycled. But
Yes.
a great handful of things did survive. Great records. I'm sure BBC has an amazing library. But yeah, it was tough because reel to reel. I do know that being in the video business. So yeah, it's disappointing. I always hate to hear that. It's
Mm.
always disappointing. But yeah, moving on from that, and the album sales were not so great with American Gothic. So he went on to signing with Columbia with Clive Davis. How did
Yes.
Clive Davis stumble upon him?
Well, apparently Clive Davis had been aware of his earlier albums and was a fan. And when he heard that Jack Holzman and Ackles decided mutually to terminate the contract, David could have held out for another album contractually, but he didn't. And apparently Clive Davis jumped straight in with an offer, but it wasn't an offer with much money attached to it. But David was keen to have control, so he recorded the album largely at home with a friend of his called Douglas Graham, and they recorded much of the album on a four track. Which by 19 this was 1973, so you're into 16 and 24 track era by then, and so recording on a four track was unusual. And then they took the tapes into a slightly bigger studio to do a few overdubs, but a very substantial proportion of the album was recorded in his house, in his living room, uh, 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 in a house on Pacific Palisades, and um, and that was what he delivered to Columbia. The problem was for him was that shortly before he finished the album, Clive Davis was sacked from Columbia because there was this these charges relating to fraud or something that were later discredited entirely. But so Clive Davis was out of the picture, and he was the person who'd signed David, and David knew nobody else at Columbia at all. He was completely isolated. They didn't know what to do with him, and he didn't know what to do either. And you can really sense that with the way, if you compare how that album was promoted to American Gothic adverts everywhere, a lot of press coverage, TV specials, and that type of thing. And then with Five and Dime, there are a few reviews. It's very low key. It's quite clear that Columbia didn't have a clue what to do with him, and that he was dropped very soon after that. And that album sunk without trace. The other thing about that, which was disappointing for David, was that he was more popular, as I said earlier, in the UK than he was at home. And the Columbia album wasn't even released in the UK. And so where he had his biggest audience, that they couldn't get a hold of the album. So wasn't like now where with streaming and everything, everything's accessible. If the album isn't released in your territory, you never saw it.
Yeah, homemade type, mostly homemade last album, and way before somebody like, there was McCartney too. McCartney did it back in
Yeah.
1970, basically homemade. So that was, still kind of rare in that kind of time to man your own stuff and do it. Nowadays, anybody can get in and has their own digital suite, I'm sure. But back then, something like that, it didn't get the promotion. The album fails. Clive Davis sacked, all that kind of stuff. A series of unfortunate events.
Mhm.
And it's a music business. It's really tough. It's, so much great talent, and we still see it today. There's so much out there and so much to sift through, and it's very hard to break through.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is going back decades, and I'm sure there are other stories like that, but this is a very unique story about somebody who's just, a Renaissance guy in a lot of ways too, and had a lot of theatrical inspiration as well. So after the recording career, he goes on and does other artistic work, and then he gets into TV development.
That's right. Yeah, he and Douglas Graham, who had helped produce Five and Dime, they wrote for TV for a little while. They had a writing partnership, and they did their highest profile thing was a TV movie called Word of Honor. Yes, Word of Honor that came out, I think, in about 1980 or 79. And it's a decent quality TV movie. Carl Malden, who is one of the leads in it, um, Ron Silver's in it, I think. So it was, but that petered out after a while. But David, what he was really interested in doing, what he really wanted to do, was to write musicals. And he spent the rest of his life trying to do that. And he completed several full musicals, script, uh, all of the songs and everything, and had got reasonably close to getting a couple into production, but it never quite happened for him. But that was very much his creative focus after he stopped recording, but stopped making records. But he wasn't, of course, he wasn't making a living out of that. So he had to do other things, and he got into teaching a bit and that sort of thing. He went back to the University of Southern California to teach, where he had been an undergraduate in the 1950s.
Where did he live in California during that time? Did you have a specific place where he was living
By John,
in?
he lived in. Let me come back to you on that.
Yeah, I'm
I
sure.
know exactly, but the address is so familiar to me because but I can't quite remember the name. It's kind of north of Los Angeles,
Uh,
it, but not out. Let me come
yeah.
back to you. I'll
Well, yeah.
remember.
Did he have a family life there as well? Did he have
Yes,
siblings?
absolutely. Janice, who's the woman who is on the cover of American Gothic, he married her just before the recording of Five and Dime. So they'd only been married a couple of months when all of the musicians turned up at their house to make Five and Dime. And they had a son, and
Hmm.
he had a very happy family life until he died in 1999.
Yeah, lung cancer got him, but he had a close brush with death in 1981, I believe.
That's right. Yeah, he was driving home with his young son, who was, I think, must only have been about three or something. Was in the car at the time, and he was hit by a driver on the wrong side of the road. And
Hmm.
David and Janice's son was fine. David was very seriously injured and had multiple operations, had to have his hip replaced, and almost lost his arm.
Oh.
Um, so it was really, but he did recover, and he had to use a wheelchair for quite a long time after the accident, but he did recover. But yeah, that was a close shave. That was in Easter 1981.
Mm. Wow. And that's an amazing story, but lung cancer took him out in the end. That's
Yeah, yeah, he had a brush with lung cancer in the early 90s. And round just as he had an operation, had part of his lung removed, and recovered, and was well. And around about that time, his three Electra albums were reissued on CD in the UK, and he got a little bit of attention. And there were a few "Where are they now? Whatever happened to?" type of articles in the UK music press. And David was interviewed and was extremely cheerful and positive and happy that the records were out again, surprised that they were out again. But you could tell, even from what he said, that his real focus was on wanting to do the musical that he was writing at the time. And he would always talk about that in interviews. He would I myself interviewed him in the late 1990s, toward the end of his life, for an article about what happened to him. And he was extremely charming and gracious and warm and generous and happy to talk about his music, but really wanted to talk about his musicals as well. And he was writing, worked for a long time on a musical about Amy Macpherson's
Mm.
sister Amy, who was a in the UK, it's not somebody who's known at all, but probably in the USA is better known even now. But she was a very famous and somewhat controversial sort of media evangelist, I suppose. She was somebody who used radio a lot in the 20s and 30s.
Hmm.
And she There was a scandalous episode in her life where she went missing and then turned up a few weeks later and said she'd been kidnapped. But there was a lot of dispute about that, and some people were saying she ran off with her lover. And anyway, David's musical, which is called Sister Amy, was all about that disappearance. And he worked on it for a long time and got it to quite a high standard and had some workshop productions of it in Los Angeles through the 90s, but unfortunately didn't quite live long enough to see it through to a full production.
Oh, maybe the son can pick it up. What's his son doing now?
Well, yeah, I don't know. It would be great if somebody could pick it up. Who
Yeah.
knows? He made a demo of it, which he doesn't sing on himself, or not much. He hired professional singers. So he went a long way with it and was very committed to it.
Yeah, and then later on, what song did Phil Collins cover for the Desert Island Discs?
Well, he didn't cover it. He played it. So
Oh, he played
Desert
on it.
Island Discs is, for anyone who doesn't know, is a long-running BBC radio show where celebrities go on and talk about the eight records, I think it is, that they would take to a desert island if they were stranded.
Ah, okay.
And
Yeah,
and he,
that makes sense.
Phil Collins chose Downriver, which is from the first album. And at that point, David was a very obscure figure. But then Elvis Costello had a chat show briefly called Spectacle, I believe, where he had he had Elton John on as a guest. This
Uh,
was after David died, but they sang Downriver together. They
oh,
duetted,
okay.
and I think you can probably still see that online somewhere. It was on YouTube for a while.
Okay, I'll have to check that out. I'm sure it's very good if Elton's covering it. It's got to be an amazing performance. And I
Yeah.
didn't know Elvis Costello had a talker, so that's interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it was a pretty short running thing called Spectacle. I'm pretty certain, a few episodes.
And Electra was gonna do a box set at some time, and it just got scrapped.
Yeah, that was a frustrating episode. This was in the late 2010, so maybe about 2007, 2008. There was a box set that was produced, possibly even manufactured, we're not sure, but it was all designed, all mastered, and it had the three Electra albums plus about an album's worth of previously unreleased material. And beautifully packaged with liner notes by Bernie Taupin and Elvis Costello. But it was pulled at the last minute because of, I believe, an ownership dispute about one of the tracks, and it's never seen the light of day.
Yeah, always something with the legal community getting involved as well. It happens so much in music as we have seen, especially with the Beatles and how
Yes.
Alan
Yeah.
Klein got involved there and everything. Great new book. Do you have a whole line of other books? I've not really stumbled and done a deep dive on your entire catalog. Who else have you written about?
Well, my first book, which was a long time ago, was called American Troubadours, and that was about nine American singer-songwriters that I particularly liked, including David Ackles, but people like Tim Hardin and Tim Buckley and Fred Neil, Tom Rush, and so on. I wrote a book about very early electronic music. That was about 12 years ago now. I'm talking pre-synthesizer electronic music, particularly used in films and TV. I wrote a book about Lowell George of Little Feat. I
Hmm.
not just music, I write about other things as well.
Very good. And it seems very inspirational there where you are writing from as well. It seems like a nice, quiet, humble place where you can concentrate.
You mean in this
Yeah, right where
yeah,
you're at
this
there.
in the
Yeah, it
garden.
seems
Yeah,
like it.
yeah. Yeah, it's very hot at the moment in here.
Oh gosh. Yeah, that's true. You don't, do you have air conditioner there?
No, nothing like
No.
that.
An essential thing we have here in Atlanta, Georgia, in the southeastern United States. Here we are in July of 2025, and it is another scorcher, as it always is here in this
Yeah,
part of
yeah,
America. It's
yeah.
just wow. Yeah, it's essential here, but yeah, over there, I'm sure. But yeah, you definitely save on the electric bills, but then again, it's kind of tough when it gets up over a certain temperature there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but can't complain. It's better than cold and rain, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, very, very true. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This has been fantastic. It's interesting to hear about people who are really off the radar.
Mm.
And that's a general theme in my podcast is that I've talked to many people, some on the radar a little bit, and then some are way off of it. And David Ackles definitely fits that bill for sure. And it's just amazing that he has inspired some of the biggest people in pop music. It's very interesting to hear that. And you bring that to light in the book as well. So this book is available wherever we can get them.
Yeah, for I can't remember off the top of my head the exact date. Sometime in mid-August, it's just available through all the usual places that you get your
Okay.
book.
Mid-August of 2025. Be
Yeah.
sure to get that out there. Downriver. That cover photograph of the book, is that from something you pulled from his catalog? Who do you know who took that picture?
It's a bit of a mystery because in the first in the book American Troubadours, where I wrote about a chapter about David Ackles, we got that photo, and it's a photo of him playing live, but nobody knows where it was taken and who took it, and so ownership is unclear. It dates from 1968, we think, possibly 69.
Hmm. Yeah, not too far before his sophomore album, which has kind of fun sing-alongs on there too, like Mainline Saloon. It's a cheery type song. Yeah, just basically, yeah, I could picture everybody in the saloon is having fun. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Great catalog, for sure. To check him out, David Ackles. He's streaming everywhere. So I'm hoping the estate gets some money. You don't make a whole lot out of streaming, and hopefully it's the publishing that's keeping everybody in his estate going. So always hope for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining me. And once again, fantastic book. Get it wherever you get those books.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Take care. Have a good one.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
Wasn't that fascinating? I really enjoyed it. And I really, really had a good time speaking with him. Good guy, very good writer. He's done quite a bit of work in the magazine books world. So enjoy, look him up too. He's done a lot of other stuff. Great artist, David Ackles. Get that book wherever you get your books. Take care. And hopefully, we'll keep doing this. We are over 5 years into doing this podcast. And those who do download these episodes or watch them on YouTube, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. It means a lot to me. Take care.